Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's session. My name is David Senior. I'm from the Centre for Workplace Leadership, and it's my great pleasure to be hosting this, the second in our LeaderShift webinar series. The series is based on LeaderShift, our online leadership diagnostic and development platform, which looks at capabilities based on our workplace leadership capability framework. Today, we're looking at the capability of working with people, which may not be any surprise, is quite an important capability for leadership, for work generally, and for life indeed. Being able to work with people is a pretty handy thing to be able to do. We break it down into three different aspects. We're looking at relationships and networks, we're looking at supporting teamwork, and conflict management. But in today's session, we're going to focus specifically on the building relationships and networks. And we have, to help us explore this interesting terrain, to look at ways of building and maintaining professional relationships and to exercise our networking muscles, we have our special guest, who is a self-confessed super connector, Helga Svendsen. Welcome, Helga.
Thank you.
Helga is a facilitator, she's a coach, and she's a consultant, and she has a passion for connecting people, ideas, and action. She has extensive leadership experience in government, not-for-profit, and membership organisations. Helga initially trained and practiced as a lawyer before moving into the trade union movement, where she became the Assistant Secretary of the Australian Services Union. She's also been a facilitator with Sustainability Victoria, and she's also been the CEO of Hotham Mission Asylum Seeker Project. She has a very diverse and interesting range of experience. Helga has also served on a number of boards, including the Royal Women's Hospital, the YWCA Victoria, and Social Housing Victoria, and the Board Booster and Board Kickstarter as well. So she's got interesting board experience as well. She draws on all that diverse experience and now channels her skills and considerable energy into facilitation, coaching, mentoring, and empowering people to connect with ideas and people and to turn talk into action. And before we do just that, I'd also like to introduce on my far left, Antonia Mocken. Antonia is leading the development of our LeaderShift platform, and she's also serving as producer for today's session. So we want to keep Antonia really, really busy. We want to make this as interactive as possible. So please, we encourage you to send in your questions, send in your comments, send in your thoughts, and we'll endeavour to respond to them during the course of the presentation. We're also going to designate some specific time at the end of the session to respond to questions as well. So we want to hear from you as much as possible. We're also going to try something new. We're going to do a bit of polling today as well. So we're going to ask you some questions to respond to. So please, take us up on that and interact with us as much as possible. For those of you that joined us in the first session, you'll notice there's a few changes since the last time. We've redesigned our set, we've got some new banners, and we really want to make this much more interactive than the last session was as well. So please, post your questions. Now, I'm going to hand over to Helga in just a second, and I'm going to ask, perhaps first of all, for her to tell us a little bit about why she's interested in relationships and networks, because I think when a lot of people hear the word networking particularly, they kind of cringe and groan and see it as a necessary evil, something that they know is important, and the research shows that, you know, all else being considered, building relationships and networks is a really fundamental part of leadership, and being able to maintain them across barriers is really important as well. So it's something we know we need to do, but we're not very good necessarily at actually doing it. So you're the opposite of that, Helga. You're someone who actually loves networking.
It's true.
You thrive on it, so I'm just curious to know why.
Why? For a range of reasons. It's fun. It's fun for me. I get that it's not fun for everybody, but it is something that I think you can really build up, as you've mentioned before, build up your network muscle. It's something that you can practice, you can learn the skills for and get better at. And that muscle memory that you get from the gym can also apply to networking. So why do I love it? Why am I passionate about it? Because it works. It really helps to build your capacity at work, your capacity outside work, your own personal kind of story, because it's interesting. You'll learn a whole range of things about people and the world that you might not have previously known. And as I said, just because it's fun, you get energy from meeting different people. So, and maybe I can give you a couple of examples about how that's happened for me. So, like I say, it works. And I know a lot of people think, oh, you know, I'm not looking for a job. I don't need to network. And I'll give you two examples, one where it did help me getting a job. So for one particular role that I'd applied for in a membership organisation, and during that process, I decided that I wanted to learn a bit more about the organisation. So I spoke to a range of stakeholders that were involved, some members of the organisation, some funders of the organisation, board members, people who had been involved. And I did that through, and I'll talk a bit more about LinkedIn in a moment, but basically by leveraging the power that is LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. And as part of that, I remember for one particular person I was having a coffee with, even though I don't drink coffee, I go out for coffee a lot. So one particular person I was having a coffee with had arranged it quite late in the piece. By the time we got to catching up, I'd rung him the day before and said, just letting you know, I haven't actually been successful in this role, but hey, you sound like an interesting person. I'm keen to catch up for a coffee anyway. No problem, he said. So we had a conversation, and as part of that, he said, oh, I know somebody who's looking for the CEO of a Mission Asylum Seeker project. You should talk to them, which led me to talking to them. I'd heard through some other people. But part of that conversation really set me up for getting that role. So it absolutely helps when you're looking for a job. However, I think it's more than just that. I think it's, and I hear people say, oh, I don't need to be on LinkedIn. I'm not looking for a job, I don't need to be on LinkedIn. And to give you another example, I guess, of the way LinkedIn can work. So, again, when I was in the role as the CEO of Health and Mission Asylum Seeker project that had been led to me through this process, we were negotiating to move offices. So we were negotiating with this organisation. I'd had some conversations with them. Things seemed to be moving along quite well. And then it was suggested to me that whilst the organisation was happy, perhaps some people on the board were not particularly comfortable with the relationship. So again, I went back to the office, I looked on their website, looked up who their board members were, tapped them into LinkedIn, found out who I knew that also knew these board members. And let's say Antonia was a board member that I needed to connect to, and you knew Antonia. Hi, David. I need to talk to Antonia. Not quite yet, but in another month or so. Would you be happy to connect me to her at the right time? No problem, says David. So within an hour, had probably half the board of this organisation, I had a way in to talk to them. And I think that ability to connect to people that you need to influence is vital for workplace or non-workplace issues to be dealt with. We all need to influence people in different ways, and it provides an in. So there's a number of really useful ways. Shall I give you more stories?
Please do.
Well, the fact that I'm sitting here today doing this webinar with all these wonderful people came through a connection from Antonia and I. Antonia had done a course. She had met one of my co-directors at YWCA. She was moving to the UK. Antonia's from the UK, from London, yeah, and had said to Josie, well, how about I introduce you to some people? Josie said, that'd be fantastic. And then said, oh, I should return the favour. You should meet Helga. She's interesting. You guys would get along. So Antonia and I had a coffee, and since then kind of swapped different information, different networks, and partly that's what brings me here today. So it can bring a whole range of different opportunities, and you get to meet some people.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you can't always know what the end result of it will be. And in fact, if you try to force that too much, it actually negates the networking experience.
Absolutely. And one of the other things that I've just initiated is this 50 Coffees Lucky Dip. People haven't heard of 50 Coffees, just Google it. It's about catching up with people to workshop a different sort of issue or thing that you might be working through. And I've put it out to my network of people. Hey, folks, you're all interesting people. Who would like to meet somebody else interesting? Email me. If you do, you'll go in the lucky dip. The response has been incredible. So people are emailing me again. If anybody out there wants to be part of it, please feel free to let me know. And just matching people up randomly. Go and meet this person, have a coffee, talk about what each other does. There might be a particular issue they want to work through, but you never know, as you say, where that piece of information might help you in the future. It's been fabulous.
That's brilliant. Well, I'm all the more impressed that you're organising this around caffeine as a non-coffee drinker.
Peppermint tea. I don't even drink black tea.
She lives in Melbourne and she's a non-coffee drinker.
So, I mean, that's great. We've really established why it's important and how it's worked for you. I'm just wondering whether you could possibly share some tips on how people can actually go about building relationships and networks for themselves.
Absolutely. So, let's kick some of this off. Fabulous. Thank you. We'll skip to the next one. Thank you. So, I mean, this just reinforces some of the stuff that we've just said. How can networking be useful? You know, it connects you to the people you need to influence. It can help in finding a job, but it's more than just that. And you get to meet interesting people. And as we've just said, you never know where that might lead. Where can people find some of the opportunities to network? Obviously around events that you might go to that are, interesting to you, where some other interesting people might be. You can reach out around an issue. I heard one story of an American who'd moved to Melbourne, had gone to Princeton, and when he moved to Melbourne, he looked up the Princeton alumni. At the time, I might have some of the characters not quite right, but I think at the time the CEO of ANZ Bank, I think it was a Princeton alumni. So he lands in Melbourne. Hello, CEO of ANZ, can I have a coffee with you? They would never have done that had they been in their home city, but because they're in a new city, yeah, sure, no problems at all. So they catch up, introduces to a whole range of different people. And as I've said, the 50 Coffees Challenge as well, and a Lucky Dip is a really fantastic opportunity to network. So we might find out from people.
Where's the poll gone?
How they feel about the polls. How they feel about the polls. How you feel about networking. And again, like David said at the start, we'd really love to hear from you. Just for no other reason, we can work out how the polls work. So how do you feel about networking? Love it. You know, nothing better than a room full of people to meet. Or are you one of the, if I must? Or are you one of the, oh my God, I'd rather eat fried spiders, which was one of the worst things I could think of to do. And I can see people coming in. It looks like we've got a majority of if I must people.
Yes.
Fantastic. Great.
You still a bit there?
Oh,
seems to have stabilised. Yeah.
Excellent. So we've got a bit of a mix of if I must people. That seems to be the majority, and a bit of a smattering of love it and hate it people. Fantastic. Thank you. So, actually, and then I think we might, there's another quick poll that I'd just love to hear from you. Who's on LinkedIn? And if you've ever used LinkedIn to connect to a second degree connection. So, wow, you're all super efficient. I'm very impressed. Thank you very much. Okay, so most of you are on LinkedIn. Great to hear. Not everybody, but most of you. Fabulous. Yeah. And almost 50-50 on people who have used the second degree connections. Probably just a few more no's, but not too many more, but almost everyone on LinkedIn. Fantastic. Thank you. Fabulous. So this looks a bit overly complex, but I thought what I would do is take you through the kind of the model, I guess, that I use for working with others and for networking. And like I said before, it's a bit of an action plan for building that networking muscle where you can learn new things, part of it, learning it and practicing it. And as you continue to do it, it becomes easier. So for me, working with others and working with others effectively is making sure you have a plan, making sure you build rapport, working out what the ask is and getting an action, and then doing the close. And each part of those are really important to make sure people can effectively network. So if I can take you through those in turn. So firstly, planning. The planning is really, it's like the musical score that underscores the conversation. It's the thinking out what is it you need to explore? What's the question that you want to explore with people? What's the issues? What's the outcome? Who would be useful to talk to? who are you going to talk to? So there might be a list of people who are interesting to talk to, but these are the ones that you will. What are you even going to talk about? Why are you doing this? Why is it important to you? And why should the person that you're talking to be interested in that conversation? And having some thoughts around that before you even embark on your conversation is incredibly important. And can I recommend all of these why questions if people haven't already seen it? That Simon Sinek TED Talk, Start With Why, is a beautiful, quick, so the whole TED Talk's long, but you can just break it down to the small part about really working out what it is that makes you tick and how you can present that well. So that planning part, like I say, it's really important. It's like the musical score, and it's some really good pre-thinking that you can do before you even get out there. So for those that hate networking, it's a great, you can just start the thinking about it before you actually have to do it.
And we can provide people with the link to the Simon Sinek video.
Yeah, we'll add it to when we send the webinar link around.
At the end of this, got the link on one of those pages.
Okay.
Of course, yeah. Planning and preparation.
So the second part, you've done your plan, you've worked out who you need to talk to, you've worked out what you're talking about, you're sitting down at the coffee shop over a peppermint tea, in my case, or a latte if it's anybody else from Melbourne, and you think, oh, now what happens? It's really important to build that rapport and build the relationship. And to build that relationship of trust. So tell some of your story, not just the facts and figures, or not just directly to, great, you're here, David, now can you do this for me? Build the relationship around it. And as well as telling your story, listening is vital to building that relationship, which means asking questions, asking open questions, finding out about that person. You know, if you're at an event, so what brought you here? Who else do you know here? What interests you about this? We'll invite people into a conversation. And, yeah, telling part of your story, but also making sure that the other person has an opportunity and you encourage them. I know at events, some people recommend, and I think it's a great idea, to have some questions in your head already about when you're going to go, about that you could ask anybody. What brought you here? What might be your story?
We've had quite an interesting question on the plan side. About LinkedIn etiquette. Is it okay to connect with people you don't know, or is it better to get an introduction through your network?
Fabulous question. So my personal rule of thumb is that I don't connect with people on LinkedIn unless I already know them. And I do that because the way I use LinkedIn is to say, hey, David, can you introduce me to Antonia? Now, if somebody asks that of me, hey, can you introduce me to David? I want to be in a comfortable enough position to say, David, Antonia would like to meet you. Would you be happy for me to set up a coffee? And if I've never met David before, then I might not be able to do that. So my personal rule of thumb is I need to have met them, or at least have had some significant email conversation. If people just send me a, hey, do you want to connect? And I've never met them before and there's no message in there about why they want to connect, they just stay in my inbox. And when I've met them, then I'll click yes. Having said that, I know other people have different rules of thumb.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the algorithm for it has changed, because it used to have much more of, you had to be able to provide some evidence of a connection before you were able to link, and then they've taken that away. So it's almost, it is debasing it in some ways, but I guess it puts the onus on you to decide what your rules of engagement are.
And annoyingly, the app and the desktop work differently. So if you're connecting with someone, sometimes it doesn't give you the opportunity to put a message in, which I find really frustrating, because I like to put a message in saying, hey, great to meet you, whatever. So yeah, the app and the desktop. Anyway, technicalities. I don't need to get that far into it, do I?
We took you down that rabbit hole.
That's all right. So rapport, we've talked about that. Maybe, so the next part, when you're meeting with somebody, be clear about the ask or what you're asking them to do. If there is an ask, it might just be, hey, David, I'd love to catch up with you just so we can talk about what's going on in leadership. So it might be no more specific than just getting information, but be clear about what that is from the start. Or, David, I'd love to catch up with you because I'd like you to introduce me to Antonia, or I'd love to catch up with me so you can tell me more about this particular course. Whatever it may be, be clear at the start, which will have come from your planning,
yes,
what it is. When you meet with the person, ask them what it is you are planning to ask them. Don't just get caught up in the rapport. Get to the point of the conversation so that they know what it is they were about. And in the ask, you know, and again, it could be anything. It could be around information. It could be around a connection. It could be just because I'm involved in a lot of not-for-profits. It might be about fundraising, getting people involved, asking people to do stuff pro bono. Be really open to them saying no. And if they say no, that's okay. And if you ask them to connect to somebody, maybe even say, I'd love you to connect me to this person, but if you're not comfortable doing that, that's totally fine. Just so people don't feel obliged. Yeah. Give them the out. If they don't say yes, that's okay. There might be something else they'll say yes to, or another connection that comes out of it. So yeah, it's just important to be clear in what you're asking for. Ask it and be okay if they say no, I think. So again, I think it might be interesting to get some feedback from people.
Yeah, we've got some questions. I'm going to put us back on here. So someone says, I hate asking people for help. How do I overcome that?
Practice. Sorry, I don't know that it's any more technical than that. I think, well, no, sorry, I take that back. There are a few ways. I think you can couch it in, whenever I'm asking people for a favour, I literally put in the subject line, favour, ? I think you upfront I'd love to ask you for a favour. If it's not okay for you to help me out in whatever way it might be, that's okay. So give them the out. But give them the privilege of either saying yes or saying no. I love helping people out, and I know lots of people that do. People love to be asked to help out. So I think it's just recognise that it's your own discomfort in asking. It's often not their discomfort in being asked of. And if they are uncomfortable, they'll tell you, and that's okay. But mostly people consider it a real honour. So, yeah.
That's definitely been my experience. Yeah. And I might also make a recommendation. The book, I think it's called The Power of Ask, or The Power of Asking, Amanda Palmer's book, is well worth reading on that if you feel reluctant to ask people. It's quite inspiring.
And if you think about the person who asked the question or others that might be with us, think about a time when you've been asked to do something. Most often, when you've been asked to do something, whether it's small or big, it's like, oh, well, they asked me. They think that I can, whether it's pick up the kids from school, it's like, oh, they trust me enough to be able to do that, or be involved in an organisation or present a webinar. People are invariably quite chuffed about it. So, yeah.
Got another good question here.
Mm-hmm.
Someone says, I like the idea of building a strong network, but I feel uncomfortable meeting without a clear purpose. How do you go about general networking with no ask? The general networking, in a way, is a purpose. I think that is the purpose. The purpose is to meet interesting people and see what comes of it. So, again, if you go back to the 50 coffees example that I mentioned before, there's been a whole range of different examples about that, but one of them was a woman in America who just was trying to work out what she wanted to do work-wise, and she just decided to meet with 50 random people to just talk about what they did. Now, her purpose was part of working out what to do next, but it wasn't specific enough. You know, she met with, I don't know, circus people and a whole range of different people that weren't really closely tied to what she currently did. So the purpose can just be meeting someone interesting. When Antonia and I met over a coffee, it was just because, oh, you sound interesting. Yeah, Josie had said you two will get on, and we thought, oh, okay.
Okay. So the purpose can be no more or less than that. It's just, and I think having that genuine curiosity about people and that genuine curiosity in their story is, for me, it's enough of a purpose, and people find that quite infectious. Yeah. So
one of our people just came in and said curiosity is its own purpose.
There you go. Couldn't agree more. Exactly. So, it doesn't have to be a I need to find out about this job. I need to find out about, where to find pink texters or whatever it might be. It can just be curiosity's fine.
Yeah. Is it important though to at least let the person know that you're wanting to connect with why you're curious? I mean, I think if you're just generally curious, you seem interesting, fine. But I think you're interesting because, and give some sort of guidance as to why, so they go, oh, okay, yes,
absolutely,
that makes sense. Yeah.
If you know that, if you've been connected by somebody, or you particularly, hey David, I want to have a coffee with you because I know you do work in the leadership space. If you know that, if you're at an event and I just see you on the other side of the room, I don't know anything about you, so it's a bit harder to do that. So just having that genuine curiosity in that sense can be enough.
Yeah.
So you're right. Yeah.
While we're talking about this, Olivia asked, how do you respond when people don't write back? Do you follow up, and when? And if you do, does it need to be a different ask?
Please respond to my email.
Yeah, that's right. My ask now is respond. Depending on the relationship I have with the person, I might follow up. I did just recently, thinking of an example where I've asked people to speak at an event I run. I hadn't heard. I did follow up with in the craziness of the end of the year, maybe this email got lost. Just thought I'd follow up in case it got missed in your inbox. If it's not quite such a warm connection, I would normally do one follow-up and just say, just in case you missed it, here it is. If you don't hear back after that, I just go, okay, let it go. And having said that, I am a connector. I like meeting new people and finding out things. So I've asked a lot of people for a coffee/tea, hundreds, possibly thousands, certainly hundreds of people, and I've only ever been knocked back once. So people are, back to the question about I hate asking for it, people love it. Yeah. People are very open to it. So is there any other part to that, or have I answered that question?
No, that's all good. We've got loads of questions coming in. Fantastic. So should I keep them coming?
Sure.
I love this one because this is exactly how I feel about things. I love meeting new people, but for some reason when I'm at a work function in a networking situation, I become quite shy. Any tips? I know mine is to find the person who looks shy and awkward and go up to them and go, gosh, isn't it horrible networking? But
yes, well, absolutely. So going up to somebody in the room and saying who might look shy, absolutely have a conversation with them. Going up to somebody who might not look shy and just saying, there's a lot of people here, isn't there? It's quite overwhelming. Or just what are you doing? What are you doing here? What brought you here? So I think having a few questions about that event or about the people that are likely to be at that event in your back pocket is helpful. Sometimes taking someone with you to that sort of event can be helpful. Although I would caution, don't let them become your crutch, so you and just talk to the person you've already come with and not to anybody else. Although if it's somebody that loves networking, they will draw you into the circles, which might help as well. So yeah, I think it's finding somebody to have a chat to. People are happy to do it.
And another one from Marsha. In your experience, are board positions usually the result of networking?
Excellent question. Sometimes. In my view, I think all board positions should be advertised. I'm a big fan of advertising for positions on board because I think it leads to more diversity, and diversity is an issue in many different areas of life and particularly on boards. So I think advertising opens it up to a range of people. However, not all boards do that, or not all organisations do that. Sometimes they just use their own networks. And sometimes sometimes they can be quite narrow networks. So it can absolutely help. It's not the only way of getting involved in board type work, but it certainly is one way.
And
it pains me to say that, but I think it's true.
Talking about board type work, a question really early on was, are there differences to how you should approach networking when you're at different career stages? So we've got some people today who are very early in their career, but we've got some people who are in senior positions. Should there be a difference to how they approach their networking?
I think everybody should do it. I think it's helpful to everybody. It might be I mean, if you're searching for a board role, then you will be potentially talking to other directors. If you're keen on a board role, I would think about, for example, looking at the organisations that you might be interested in, finding out who their board directors are, tapping them into LinkedIn, finding out your second connections and having a chat with them. So you might focus on those different people, either in a governance board sense or senior leadership of another organisation. So it might be I think it's more the type of people that you'll be talking to rather than whether networking is powerful enough in and of itself. Where are we?
Should we keep going with the slides?
Absolutely. So we might, let's skip over that one because we've had a conversation about it. So in the next part of the planning around working with others, the final part is the close. And the close is, well, they're all important, but it is, I think sometimes, particularly when you're a little uncomfortable about networking, you might get to the end of a conversation, oh, thank God, that's over. Just get me out of here. But doing the close properly, it's like tying the ribbon on the box or the present, and it really finishes it off. Most importantly, say thank you. It's I've seen research that suggests only 50% of people say thank you, which I find extraordinary that could be the case, but apparently that is the case. So saying thank you not only is your point of difference, but it means the person is so much more likely to actually help you out. So saying thank you is just good manners and vital. If you can summarise the conversation, great to meet with you, David. It was really good to hear about and great that you're happy to introduce me to Antonia. You know, if you want me to send you a reminder of whatever. So do a bit of a summary of the conversation about what the other person has agreed to do, but also about what you've agreed to do. I know when I meet with people, I can't help myself. So who can I introduce you to that might be helpful? So if I've agreed to do that, I make sure you do it. Make sure you do what you promised you said you would do. And if you don't, explain why. So, and follow up later. Oh, thanks for introducing me to Antonia. It was really interesting to meet her. She was really helpful in this way. Because again, people love to be asked for help, but they also love to get that feedback. So, yeah. So we might get some feedback there though. So just in thinking about the close, I don't know if we put these up as questions, but anyway, in thinking about the close, I'm wondering if people can think about what are some of the things that you could offer to do to help the people that you're meeting with? And also, what are some of the ways, other than just saying thank you, what are some of the ways that you can thank a person for what they have done? So if people have got feedback, send it through and or ask your questions.
So we got a response to your question, and it's one that we've sort of talked about, which is as a thank you, offer to connect them with someone useful.
Absolutely.
Scan your own network for people that would help them.
People and organisations. So often people want to know more about a particular organisation. Oh, can you tell me about Oxfam? Can you tell me about Telstra? Whatever it might be. So in fact, LinkedIn's awesome for that as well. You can put into LinkedIn Telstra and it'll tell you all of your connections who are at Telstra. So it's a quick way of saying, you know, here's those people. I had somebody recently, I should have asked you about this, they were going to London as part of their study trip. Who do you know in London that might be useful? I tapped into LinkedIn. Who's based in London? Here's the 5 people I know. This person I think might be interesting. So you can do it geographically as well, which is fabulous.
There's a lovely story here. I had someone who helped me significantly with a project and I took them a jar of honey from my bees.
Oh!
But most people don't get honey though.
So many reasons.
Beautiful. I love it. Love it, love it, love it.
Really good question here about networking between different cultures. So, you know, there's sort of Hofstede different dimensions of culture. So if you're networking with someone from a very high power distance culture, so a Japanese person versus an Australian. Anything on that?
Again, I guess I would say anecdotally, just be aware of those differences and the diversity of the way people interact. One of the things, again, I love about networking is you meet people who aren't like you. It's one of the really powerful things about it, because I operate in my own network and a lot of people I know are like me, whereas you need inputs from other, diversity of thought, diversity of culture, diversity of experience, all of those things. And part of the power of that is the fact that they are different. So being aware of that from the outset can be, just can be useful in that way. And sometimes just asking, what's the best way to interact? How should I be interacting? What's the best way? What are the things I should be aware of?
I was just wondering, in terms of diversity, I imagine that a lot of asks are around trying to connect with someone who's possibly senior to you in some way, so that there's that ability to leverage that. But do you know of examples, or do you think that it's also useful for leaders in particular to actually connect with people that aren't necessarily senior or parallel with them?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like, it's the equivalent of doing a 360-degree review in the workplace, where not only is important about what your colleagues think and your managers think, but what do the people that report to you think about? So, you might get feedback, from customers of a similar organisation or of your own organisation. I think I heard recently about the, probably not so much networking, but the whole VW debacle, and that there had been some customer feedback about that. And I think that the systems that they had in place in that organisation to hear some of that feedback weren't as robust as they could have been, which, as we know, led to a little bit of an issue for them. So hearing from people at different levels of an organisation, or not even within an organisation, outside, we can always learn from each other. We can always learn different things. I've mentored a couple of people, and often people see mentoring as, senior person imparting their world knowledge to, said junior person so that they can be just like them. And I'm firmly of the view that a mentoring relationship is two-way, and the mentor learns just as much about things as the mentee does. Yeah. It's a partnership. It's not a...
It's a symbiotic relationship, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think this, mentoring is just another form of networking. So doing it at different levels of leadership, whatever that might be, is incredibly useful for people. Yeah.
We've had quite a good question which leads into some of the sort of academic thinking behind the relationship building. So one of the issues that's identified in the literature is that there are sort of three types of networks: operational, strategic, and personal. And Olivia asks, I notice your PowerPoint and Twitter details are for you. What's the right balance between work-related and personal interest networking? And what about those who wear a few hats?
Yes.
Great question.
Great question. Cool. It's because I work for myself, so I am all mixed up together. If I worked at a particular organisation, the branding may well be part of that. Organisation. Run me through the question again. Sorry,
I've moved over.
Sorry.
What's the right balance between work-related and personal interest networking? And what about those who wear a few hats?
Oh, yeah. Look, I find there's not necessarily a really clear line between it. If I think of my emails, I try and keep my work email on my work email and my personal email on my personal email, but it gets messed up because some of my personal connections are also professional connections and can provide professional advice, input, counsel, whatever it may be. I think sometimes it probably depends on where you work and what the culture in that organisation is around handing out your card far and wide in personal networks and so on. So partly it might be around your workplace culture and what is acceptable. And it's about what works for you, how blurry you want that line to be. I do try and keep work and personal quite separate because it's important to have, just those things you do where you don't think about work, which I think in those three levels, strategic, operational, personal. Personal is really important to keep those separate ideas and experiences So it's not always in a workplace culture. I'm not sure if that's the clearest way of answering it, but I think that it is important to keep some of the personal stuff separate in terms of what the professional side is comfortable with. Partly, if you're in an organisation, what is that organisation comfortable with, and partly what are you comfortable with as well. But in this day and age of mobile phones and everything zinging through it, it is harder and harder to keep them separate.
I think the literature that Olivia is referring to is Ibarra and Hunter, and I think they talk about as you transition into a leadership role that the strategic obviously becomes more of a focus as well. So the operational and the personal, yes, definitely, but you're starting to pivot towards the strategic and the future thinking.
Yep.
Have we got any other questions?
Not at the moment.
Oh, I've got some. I know we haven't got
4 minutes
left. We've got about 4 minutes left. So I'm just wondering, can you have too big a network?
I think there's layers of your network. I think you've always got your inner sanctum that might be, again, in those professional, operational, strategic, and then there might be the outer sanctum. I think probably relates a bit back to the question before about LinkedIn. Do you just accept every invitation that you get, or do you keep it to people that you've met? My personal line on it is it's people I've met, and it's not for me about having 10,000 connections or 1,000 connections on LinkedIn. It's about making, given building rapport and building a relation, it's around a relationship.
Yes.
So there needs to be some connection with the person who is in your network. So depends on how many you can juggle. Some people can juggle more than others, but I would say you need to ensure that there is that level of relationship there, and it doesn't just get to the point where you've got 5,000 Facebook friends but you've got no idea who they are. Or when you contact me and say, hey, can you introduce me to Antonia? I say, I don't know who Antonia is. I don't even know why I'm connected to her. So I'm not sure that size matters. It's the quality.
Quality, not quantity.
That's right.
And on that, and it's sort of touched on before, but it's one thing establishing the relationship and maybe having your ask responded to and answered, but how important is maintenance of that relationship in a longer term fashion, or sort of moving away from it just being that one-off transaction?
Yeah, again, it depends partly on what that relationship is, but I mean, I would try and, for people, certainly people who are in a sanctum, you want to at least have a phone call or catch up, something, whatever is most regularly for that relationship. It might be monthly, it might be 6 monthly, it might be annually, it might be less than that. It depends on what works for that relationship. For some of those longer term relationships, the example I gave before about when I was at the Asylum Seeker Project and contacting people on the board, one of the people I contacted there I hadn't seen for probably 10 years and hadn't known them properly since university. And it's like, hi, no, we haven't seen each other in a while, but just wondering if I can ask this favour. And fortunately, he was open to it and was no problem because we had that connection going back. So it's like a garden. You need to tend it a little bit. You can't just let it run wild. You need to, and not be too big that you can't tend it.
Well, I think that's a lovely place to leave it. We could continue, and I'm sure we've got lots of fantastic questions, but I would like to say thank you.
Thank you.
I want to be one of the 50% that does say thank you. It has been fantastic talking to you about relationships and networking, Helga. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Antonia. Thank you all for coming along, and we'll keep you posted as to when the next session will be in about a month's time. We hope you can join us as well, and also tell your friends and colleagues and your networks about this fantastic LeaderShift series, because we'd love to see you all at the next one. Thank you.